All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 267 of the More Than Just Code podcast. My name is Tim Mitchell, and I am in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined once again by Mark Rubin down in San Jose, California.
Hello.
And over on the left-hand coast, we have Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
All righty.
I'm on the same coast, too.
Yeah, the left coast. Yes, that's true. Thanks for pointing that out so people don't know where San Jose is.
Well, the way you said it, it sounded like there were different coasts involved.
That's true. That is true. And I'm not on the East Coast, so I'm not on the right coast either, so technically, I guess, you know. And do you know the way to San Jose?
No coast, but yeah, Mark's left coastedness is kind of
hardly know the way.
Directionally more correct. You probably described me as upper left coast.
Upper left, yes.
Closer to Canada, the Great North.
You just wish you had access to our donuts and our Timbits and stuff. All right. Although you can get the instant coffee. Remember, I posted that a couple of weeks ago, right, Tim? And did I tell you I tasted some of it when I was in New Brunswick?
I don't recall you talking about that. So you got packets of instant Tim Hortons coffee?
No. It is so at my sister-in-law's place, they had a jar of Tim Hortons coffee, like instant coffee, like, you know, the freeze-dried stuff. And because I've tried their Keurig before, and I just said to Carol, never buy this, never bring this into my house again.
Yeah, it was pretty awful. I tried it too.
Yeah, it tastes exactly like Tim Hortons coffee, I hate to say, which is not the best coffee. But although I'm sure people are yelling at their phones right now. I do like the dark roast, I will admit. I will drink that stuff, but the other stuff is, no, not so much. But anyway, so the instant coffee, you take a teaspoon of this stuff and you throw some boiling water in, and I drink coffee black now, right? So, and I have for like the last 15 or so years. And it's actually not bad. It does have that sort of Tim Hortons flavor, but the freeze-dried instant coffee that I sent a picture to you, Jaime, a while back, is actually passable as a drinkable liquid, right? So, and back in the day, I used to drink instant coffee all the time before I got into home brewing became other than percolating, became a sort of way to make coffee, right? Because percolated coffee, you can ruin that really quick too. Anywho, the old-fashioned percolator style, right? So, so we have some fact check from last week. I had, as I was telling the guys before we started recording here, that I had posted up that we were talking about iOS 13.1 being made available in the future. I believe the date was September 30th, but I wasn't sure, so I had left it empty and I was going to confirm it. And yet, this morning, I noticed that on my phone that was telling me that it was available. So I checked I've got a link here from Mac Rumors from the 24th of September, which was yesterday as we record, on the 25th, it came out yesterday. And so this is the same iOS 13.1 it's not the same. This is the differentiator, right? This is iOS 13.1. This is for the iPhone devices. Of certain caliber, and it's different than iPadOS, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but I believe iPadOS came out at the same time, right? And they've put back in things that they had removed from the beta testing, and it was odd that we talked about this, last couple of weeks, that the 13.1 beta came out before, which is unusual, I think. It came out before iOS 13 itself shipped, right? So last week when the phones came out, they shipped with iOS 13. This is a new incremented upgrade, and more things put back in.
I suspect what happened here was that the iPadOS version wasn't ready for 13.0. Right.
Okay.
And so they needed a couple more weeks or whatever. And so they made this one as this is really the iPadOS release. But there's an iPhone release as well that goes along with it because there's certain features that are probably common to both.
Yeah. Well, and
that's my guess what happened here.
Yeah. And it's interesting because there's another article I was reading that we'll talk about later that I got the impression that they're splitting the two OSs up from each other so that they can have different release dates for them, so they don't have to be in parallel releasing them, right? Because I know for a fact that developing for both platforms at the same time is challenging, especially now with all the different sizes. I discovered some bugs in the iPad Pro 12.9 that I didn't anticipate being there because I was using size classes and all that kind of stuff, and yet I've been surprised to find that a couple of my apps in iOS 13 don't lay out correctly on iPad, just on the iPad Pro. They're fine on the other iPads, right?
You mean the large iPad Pro?
Yeah,
or
the
iPad
large
Pros
one,
in general?
because it has more pixels, right? So
right.
Yeah, so if I was using any kind of frame hinting or whatever, or any springs and struts from the older code, or if I was using in one case it was a Cocos 2D app, the screens, the image didn't fill the screen, so that was my challenge there, right? But yeah, but this particular release from yesterday, I'm reading the top of this article here, that it is iOS and iPadOS 13.1 came out at the same time. But in the past, I mean, they've introduced iPhones in the September time frame and iPads either later in the fall or in the spring, right? Originally they came up in the spring, so.
But it's been a while since they've done that.
No, but what I'm saying though is this opens up the door for them to be able to do that, to be able to have a separated iOS and iPad targeted release, right? Mm-hmm. Plus, they're also as we've been saying for the last 4 years or so, that we kind of always. I remember Aaron was always saying that he always thought that iPad should have its own OS, and it should have things that are sort of in between the Macintosh and iOS experience, right? That are unique to that platform, because it's got so much more space, right? And that's kind of sort of where we're getting. Mm-hmm. Jaime, anything?
I can't participate yet in all the goodness, because I have, as in my usual paranoid and cowardly way, I've generally waited like about a week when a new version, like a major version of iOS comes out.
Yeah.
I was extra scared just given how chaotic the 13 beta seemed to be, and the fact that 13.1 was ready, so close to the 13.0 release. Yeah. I'm scanning this Mac Rumors.
Well, don't get into the weeds yet, because we'll talk about the details in the next couple of this. Unfortunately for this show, we've linked things about 13.1 later on, but this is just fact checking the date, right?
Right. So with regard to dates and not functionality, I'm considering, just given that I haven't seen anything major that like really scares me in terms of bugs from any of the normal sources, and this set of commentary, the comments threads underneath this particular article that you've put for the show notes, nothing really sticks out as being horrific. So maybe I will sacrifice the iPad tonight to that upgrade cycle. And then if that goes well, then maybe during the day in the morning I'll upgrade the iPhone.
Yeah, well, I've removed I believe I've removed all the profiles from my phone, so I'm running the Gold Master of iOS 13 on my phone, and I will update to the 13.1 and hopefully get out of the beta cycle. I've also removed it from the iPad. I did have to update to the latest beta a couple of days ago, and I'll explain why in a bit. But yeah, it's...
I uploaded to 13.1 about an hour or so ago.
Yeah.
And haven't seen any issues so far.
So you've come from 12 to 13.1?
No, I was already on 13.
Oh, are you? Okay. Have you been playing around with dark mode and stuff like that yet, or?
A little bit. Yeah, I have it. I'm set to dark mode.
Yeah.
Oh, interestingly enough, I just noticed that 13.1 reset my phone to light mode.
Oh, interesting. Things to be aware of. Yeah, and I'm noticing too that I don't know if I commented anywhere here, or if there's an Ask MTJC, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jaime, but one thing I commented about Twitter was I was using Twitter the other day, and I opened up my phone, which I run in dark mode, and Twitter came up in dark mode, and it was a shock to me. I'm like, oh, I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready to start using Twitter in dark mode, and I hadn't noticed that Twitter doesn't really honor the display size, like the text size, that I choose a slightly larger text size, and I didn't realize it was doing that. And turns out that you can't, so I very quickly went to the settings and found that you can actually turn off the dark mode in Twitter. But then they also have a handler for how they do font sizing. They're not using dynamic type, or is it dynamic type, or the accessibility setting for larger font. You have to use a slider to make the text larger and smaller. So I didn't go all the way to the largest size, but I did move up the dial in terms of size. And Slack also has switched over to dark mode as well. And we'll talk about the dark mode setting hopefully when we get to it in the follow-up. Anyway, so let's dive into some Ask MTJC with Jaime Lopez Jr.
Yeah, the first one we have here is this chain from you, Tim. Mm-hmm. Continue and Paul Wilkinson.
Right. Yeah, he was talking about after he updated to iOS 13, he got the first of what will become many Bluetooth peripheral warnings about Facebook wants to scan Bluetooth peripherals. So you'll find that many applications will do this. This has been one of the most annoying things about the beta thing, is that just about every second day you're getting a notification about some app. Like you used to get with the location one. In fact, the location notifications are even more bothersome But yeah, strangest things. And when we were recording last week, I discovered that my Pi Day Countdown app was also, Pi Day Countdown app was also asking for Bluetooth, and I wasn't, as a developer, wasn't even aware that I was even using Bluetooth. So I kind of replied back to him that I don't think he was postulating that it was Facebook who was doing this, and it wasn't, in my opinion, Facebook doing it per se. But in my case, it was the Google Ads or AdMob, I guess, must be doing something with Bluetooth devices. So anyway, we went back and forth about this, and he posted a link here from the Verge that talks about how many apps will be wanting to do this. So I tagged it with Ask MTJC so we could talk about it. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So in your case, I was trying to suss out whether you were using like core location or something within Pi Day Countdown, because I could be wrong, and they probably have changed this in iOS 13, but I could have sworn when you got location permission from the user, like for GPS coordinates, you would also get access to the Bluetooth location for iBeacons, but maybe that was separate altogether than like normal. I would like to use Bluetooth connectivity as a way to connect to peripherals. I don't really know too much off the top of my head.
Right, and like I said, I'm not using location in Pi Day Countdown. I don't know why I would use location in Pi Day Countdown, but obviously I would think that if, in the case of ads, I could understand why they would want to know where you are. If AdMob is feeding you, they don't want to advertise something in Toronto if you're in Seattle, for instance, right, and vice versa. So that might be a reason why they would want to use location, but I would have had to, as from the rules of iOS or iOS-dom, I would have had to gone in and opted into some sort of Bluetooth permission statement, I would have thought, right, and put in a reasonable reason why I'm asking for it, but and write to the user a custom statement as to why my app needs to use it, right? So,
right.
And I haven't and didn't, and in fact I haven't touched iPad or Pi Day Countdown in at least a year, right? So yeah, I was surprised, just a surprise, but this notification thing, that's also the location one is also problematic for developers, because it'll pop up a map which will show all the places that your app has requested locations as they're using your apps. And so, like in the case of the picture here, it's got the person going from Newburgh, New York to New York City, which is quite a ways, right? Actually, that's probably Newburgh, Pennsylvania. But anyway, and you get these huge giant maps that scroll across the whole screen, and it's a little perturbing. It would have been, I guess if we had read the updates from Apple, we would have noticed that this kind of stuff was going to be presented to the user, but it took us all by surprise, right? All right. You guys are still there, right? I'm just checking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I feel like the moral of the story, like, that's come up several times over the illustrious 5-year history of this very show, is that you got to watch out for those third-party libraries. It sounds like you got hit by this one in this case, and this is something that's been in there presumably for like a very long time. So it's rough as the platform moves along. You end up with like, oh, I didn't realize this is what we signed up for, because now it's being exposed more directly.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is the danger, as Mark always likes to say. He doesn't like third-party dependencies.
Yep.
All right, what's next, Tommy?
Another tweet from Paul Wilkinson. This one relates to pricing of the iPhone 11. We had talked about it in sort of different countries and how pricing might work. He says here that the 64 gigabyte iPhone 11 is $1,199 Australian. And if you convert $699 US to Australian dollars and add the 10% tax, because Australian prices always include the tax, you get to about 1,130 Australian dollars. So at least a US dollars amount of $42 uplift, and then you do the exchange in your head. Apple has to cover the cost of doing business in Australia, higher minimum wage, more annual leave, etc.
I'd also think that might be a carbon tax too. If you think about like how far, like when you ship things too, right? Like you have to, sometimes you have to pay gasoline as they call it, or gas tax for transport, right? So that $42 and the $50 that gets it up into Canada may be the same thing. Even though we all know they all ship from Shanghai and they land in Alaska and they get distributed from there. So I'm sure it's something similar happens for devices going to from Singapore to Australia. Must take a different route, but but it's arguable whether it costs more to ship to Australia, and probably costs more to ship to Australia than it does to ship to Canada, let's say, right? But yeah,
not from China.
Well, this is my point, right? Like it's almost as if we're paying for devices to be shipped from California, which seems to be I guess they're like, what's the rationale? Like, from Alaska to, mind you, I've watched, transports of equipment go from Shanghai to Texas to Calgary to Mississauga to me, kind of thing, right? Over a number of days, like waiting for equipment for people to arrive for customers and stuff like that. But, theoretically, it's like Shanghai to Alaska to Toronto, right? Like, why does it, again, what's the rationale? Is it that hard to get to Australia, really?
He's not in the tweet, he's not saying that it's anything to do with shipping. It's, in fact, everything else, everything but the shipping. Mm-hmm. Higher minimum wage, more annual leave, etc. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you have to pay the guy delivering it more money, then somebody's got to pay for that. Doesn't necessarily mean the consumer should, but
right. That's my point.
A possibility.
That's my point. Yeah. Well, 10% tax too. They're getting off easy. We have 13% up here. Or at least in Ontario. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah.
I think his point actually is that it's not particularly unreasonable.
I suppose.
Right?
In this case, before learning about the higher minimum wage and more time off and stuff, I just would have assumed, for hardware that sort of makes sense. It's like getting stuff to Australia is like getting it to the moon, practically. But for software things, that's the thing that always sort of surprised me, that their software prices would be higher. I'm like, it's just bits over the wire. And if you translated it for Canada or the UK, like you're done.
Well, it's interesting. I was listening to a show. My main argument with this, though, is the lack of transparency from Apple in these other countries. Like, why are they charging more? Like, if you do the number exchange rate, like he said, I mean, yes, I agree with his argument, but why are we not hearing that from Apple? Right? That it costs more because of the higher wage or whatever. And just as a side note here, I was listening to Spark CBC Radio. They had a lady on talking about the actual cloud, the internet. We all talk about the cloud. And the cloud is actually really a bunch of cables that run under the ocean. And those cables have to be maintained and repaired. And, like they get upset and, accidents happen to them, like natural accidents, animal accidents, boats run over them, that kind of stuff. And the cost of actually running these cables across the ocean floors to get, the internet around the world, right? Although we all think it goes up into the air with this fictional cloud that we all talk about, right? It's just interesting from an infrastructure point of view. I'll find a link for that in the show notes, and I'll post that in there for people who are curious about how the internet actually really works. It is a series of tubes, right? No?
Just all the bits.
Depends how you define a tube.
Huh?
Depends how you define a tube, I guess.
Yeah. Well, they're tubes with copper in them, right? All right. One more. I think we got one more, right, here, Jaime?
We got two. The first one of the remaining two is from a friend of the show, former guest host, and person of many words, including the word bugs, is Gregory Hio.
Gregory Archibald Hio, isn't it?
Gregory Archibald Hio, Esquire. Thank you for reminding me. Sent us a little tweet here that says, I was driving it home in a vehicle with CarPlay, no less. And he's playing, guess what? The More Than Just Code podcast on CarPlay. He's got a little screenshot here of that. So those of you driving at home will have that.
Did you notice the app he's using?
I don't know. I don't have CarPlay, so I don't know if that's just sort of what
the red icon there. That's Pocket Casts.
Oh, okay. So that's the active app. It's really hard to tell. I've not used CarPlay for this. I've used an older version of CarPlay for sure, and was not playing podcasts. Was doing just music and sort of wayfinding navigation, the Apple Maps. So I didn't know, and I'm not a Pocket Cast user, so I didn't realize that's what he was using to play this show. Right.
If you had Overcast, also has a CarPlay version as well. So I've used Overcast in my rental cars in the past. Alrighty, cool. And you have one more?
Yeah, this last one is a preview or a spoiler for later in the show. You had tweeted about me. I originally tweeted that there's a great way for folks to get started in the open source community, and
we'll save it for later.
You thought I should tell us more for hashtag AskMTJC, and I said it's in the show notes. Spoilers. That's all right.
And my response was like, this proves once and for all that Tim doesn't read the show notes before the show.
Hiding in plain sight is where I put my picks of the week.
That's a great place to hide it. Yeah, put it in the show notes. Tim won't see it. Alrighty then. So let's move on to our follow-up then.
Yeah, this first one came out, I guess, around the time that we started recording, or maybe I just didn't notice it in my feed. This is related to the top 10 Apple Arcade launch games you have to play. As I mentioned earlier, I've not updated to iOS 13 yet, so can't try out Apple Arcade. Tim, I think you have, and I was kind of curious if you played any of these games and had any opinions on whether some of these are worth a shot.
I've played a couple of games so far, because obviously I'm not a big gamer guy, but I did try. I want to try it out again. I downloaded it because I wanted to see how it installs, and we talked about it last week. And my big bugaboo still is that there doesn't seem to be games that my 4-year-old granddaughter can play. However, and we talked about Where Cards Fall, which is related to the name of the company is actually made by Snowman here in Toronto. But I think in this article it talks about it's actually two companies put together. And this comes back to what I was saying earlier about the iPad OS. I was running a beta, I think 4 or 5 of iOS something or other, 13, I'm not sure, on the iPad. And when I went to run Where Cards Fail, that's subconscious, Where Cards Fall, it actually did fail because the screen never got it. I saw the Apple Arcade screen that showed, like a splash screen that shows up, and then a little looks like a guitar pick with a hourglass in it to show it's loading, and then the screen just went black. And so while I was waiting for that to happen, I did, after a couple of days, I tried doing it on my iPhone, and it worked fine with iOS 13. And then so I went back in, and my iPad was telling me there was an update to Beta 6, so I downloaded Beta 6 13.1, and sure enough, the app ran. I still haven't had a chance to go through it yet. It seems sort of mysterious, and it's got some atmospheric music, but I haven't really gone into it too deeply. Well, one game I did play, I think, is on this list. Let's see. Oh, maybe it's not. I saw an icon for it before, but it's kind of a perspective puzzle game where you have these like shapes, and on the shapes, a target appears, and you have to rotate the shape to be able to get to the target. Sort of like Monument Valley, but like in a very sort of just linear graphic mode. And that was kind of interesting as apps go. But yeah, is this the article that talks about how they're being made, or is that later, Jaime?
No, there's another one sort of related to this that covers the Apple Arcade development side. So we had wondered, how the heck is this stuff being paid for? Is it money up front? Is it you get a cut based on, just peanut buttering the subscription price across all the games, all developers? Is it based on usage, like your game is being used more than somebody else's?
Right.
And this article here from GameDaily.biz is claiming that Apple is fronting the development costs, so making it more like a traditional publisher-developer deal. And certainly there are some places that are pretty well known, like Konami and Capcom, and places that sort of had apps already ready to go or games ready to go. But it sounds like some folks just sort of had a hope and a dream and maybe a sketch on a cocktail napkin that was convincing enough for Apple to say, sure, we'll let you do the program. We'll front you the money to do the development. Apparently.
So do you think they would help more than just code or update Geek Squad? Because Geek Squad has been languishing in iterative hell, as they mentioned one of these apps. Talk about one of these apps. I think the Snowball app, or the Snowman app I was just talking about. They were saying that it was originally took a long time to go through different iterations. The game band from LA-based studio, but it's published by Snowman. They were saying that they went through development hell, is what they've got here written down, and Apple stepped in and gave them a hand, right?
I mean, I don't know, maybe. I mean, I was joking with you on Twitter that, that new game that Panic is publishing. I don't know who the developer is, the Untitled Goose Game. I said, well, Tim, you should market yourself as Titled Goose Game for Geek Squad and rebrand.
Right, yeah. So actually, this is where I thought the article was. So the screenshot they got in the middle of the gray box it's got like a cube, and it's got a finger showing a gesture. This is the wordless tutorial in that app I was talking about. This is the thing where you have the little circles that you have to rotate the cube to score the points, right? Or clear the targets. It doesn't say what the name of the app is, though. Let me look on my phone or iPad. Yeah, but anyway, that is the game I was talking about. It begins with an S. I'm not sure. Spectre or something like that. Do any of these games ring a bell with you, Jaime? Have you seen any of these titles before? Or I know they're exclusive to iPad or iOS. iOS or Game Center.
There's some weird exclusivity. So it's worth noting that apparently the development teams maintain the rights to their games, so that's good. Unclear if there is additional revenue sharing beyond the initial fronting of money to get things started. Some of these games, like Sonic Racing, has existed before, and I don't know if it's a straight port of the old Sonic Racing game or if it's a new game in the same series. I don't think any of these were ones that I had necessarily known about prior, and I could be totally wrong. As regards to exclusivity, it seems like it varies. Some of them are purely exclusive to Apple, like nobody will ever have it, and or at least for a timed exclusive. And others seem to be like, yeah, you can release on other platforms, just not on mobile platforms.
Right.
Specifically Android, right, in this case. So Switch, Xbox, PlayStation would be acceptable, but not other competitive platforms.
Sure. By the way, the real-time follow-up, the name of that game, the app I'm talking about is Spek, S-P-E-K. So that's the perspective, twisty-turny, simple game. But I guess good enough for arcade. Interesting to see. Well, I don't know. I guess maybe next year they'll give us a bit more, or maybe they'll have a game keynote or presentation kind of session on how you get into this exclusive club where EA, the likes of EA and Konami and Namco run, right?
Yeah, it'd be kind of interesting to see how this goes, because this ends up having impacts to the broader app and game ecosystem, and especially with regard to pricing. If folks start to expect that all you can eat for $4.99 is sort of what they want, what does that mean for other games that are out there, their apps too?
Yeah, it does raise the bar, I guess, in terms of quality and what can be done. Like, you're not going to get a bunch of Flappy Bird type things in arcade, I guess, right? But would something like a Flappy Bird have survived in this new economy?
Yeah, and it turns it into more of that traditional model for game development. Like we've talked about how whatever people's problems with the App Store may be, they are great problems to have compared to, like, if you tried to make something traditionally for Nintendo or Sony or Microsoft. It's like, oh, you don't like a $99 a year thing? Guess what? Here's a $10,000 dev kit that you need to buy. Oh, is your game suck too much and our QA doesn't like it? Guess what? You don't get to sell your game, right? It's way harsher. And not to say that Apple's going that direction, but if it becomes like this exclusive club to be into Apple Arcade, and that's sort of like the in the future only feasible way to have a business for games, like what does that mean for indie development is something to keep a watch on.
Yeah, it's very a 90s or 2000 sort of a model, but yeah, you're right. That's what the price to enter the game is quite high. You have to be seriously invested in that, right? I mean, I suppose if you've got backers and whatever, $10,000 for a development kit isn't that big a deal. But for the independent developer who's like, slinging hash and flipping burgers, it's not that easy to get into, right?
Has there been any mention of in-app purchase for arcade?
No, there's no in-app purchases. It's all you can eat, like Jaime said, right?
That's for sure.
Yeah, I believe that's
will continue to be that way.
Undetermined, but I don't know if you'll have a like downloadable content DLC type of atmosphere. Like the sort of problem here is like, well, if I wanted to add a new set of levels or something, like would it need to create another game? Because Apple's not going to let us do an in-app purchase to get the new pack. I don't know.
Well, but I mean, the thing about it is we've talked about Monument Valley. They disclosed their numbers for the first two, for Monument Valley 1 and Monument Valley 2. I mean, and to make a game of that level, it takes hundreds of thousands of dollars to do, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so, and I mean, that's kind of what I would expect that the games that are coming out of arcade are in that range, because, Apple's putting this game in front of, millions of people, 100 million people, and obviously that's going to hopefully drive, the ability for you to upgrade and all that kind of stuff. I have no idea how does a developer get paid, or is it Apple fronts you the money and like royalties on a book, if you get fronted to write a book, you don't get any more money until you reach a certain threshold of sales, right? Like nobody's gotten rich writing tech books, is what the story goes, right? No comment. All right. Yeah, I mean, in traditional publishing, an author would make, from an old hardcover book, days, the author would make 2 or 3%. And I know it's like even musicians on the App Store and Spotify are getting pennies per purchase kind of thing, right? right? So it's interesting to see what the return is, right, on getting into this type of business, right? I mean, besides the glory of having a cool game and stuff, and being able to build something like that. But yeah, if you've got Papa Apple to fund your way, then it's all good gravy, right? Like here in Canada, we have programs where you can get the government funded venture capital to work with, right? We have several programs. There's one called Shred, where if you have a new idea that's never been done before, and you're producing original content in your game or app, the government will, with lots of due diligence and paperwork and logs submitted, they will fund your development. You can pay for 2 or 3 developers with the kind of money you get from them. And there's also a lot of movies are made here in Canada with government funding. I'm just trying to remember what the name of the company, what the thing is. I'll obviously have to fact check it for next week, but I should know, because some of the work I've done has been funded by that kind of that kind of government money that's made for creative types to make movies and games and books and websites and things, right? I don't suppose you have things like that in the States, right?
Well, there are things like that for sure.
Like programs for engineering money kind of thing, or design money.
Yeah, I mean there are all sorts of grants and things you can apply for, but there's lots of competition, and I don't know if I don't know if they're as easy to get as it sounds like they are in Canada, but they do exist. You just kind of have to find them.
Right. So just having a quick look to see if I can find the name of this thing before I forget.
With regard to the arts,
Canadian Media Fund, that's what it's called.
There you go.
Yeah.
With regard to arts and film sort of media stuff, the closest thing I can think of that immediately comes to mind is the state of Georgia apparently has a lot of grants or tax cuts or something, and you'll see at the end of a lot of movies that this film was made in part by funds related to Georgia Film Fund or something of that nature.
Yeah, next time you're watching a movie on Netflix or whatever, and don't skip, like try to figure out the key combination to see the full credits. At the very end of it, you'll often see the Canadian Media Fund, and there's like an orange sort of pixelated icon there. And I see it a lot, like movies that are, because they're filmed here north of the border, a lot of times funding is coming from the Canadian Media Fund because it's employing Canadians, right? That's the whole idea.
I just did a Google search on small business grants and came up with a website that has 106 ways to get free money for your business.
Okay.
Top small business grants in 2019. Number 1 is the Small Business Innovative Research Program. Then there's the Small Business Technology Transfer Program. Then there's the Rural Business Enterprise Grant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It goes on from there. So, I mean, I think this stuff is out there. People just generally don't think of looking for it. And maybe the amount of work you have to do to get it, maybe is not worth it in many cases. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some advice that I've gotten. And then it's North. I met a few people who, back in 2014 when I first started going there, it was held in Ottawa, and there's a lot of people in Ottawa who are behind, know how to get the money. They did say that it's almost as much work as it is to develop the app to get the money, right? So, so I guess that's sort of another high bar for people to try and get past, right? So there's also the Canada Council, which funds musicians and fine artists and stuff like that, but again, you have to go and it's almost like doing a pitch. You have to go pitch and present, and you may get accepted, you may not, right? And depending on the scope you need, some artists are able to, like painters and sculptors, are able to buy groceries and pay rents with the monies that they get for these kind of things. And of course, this is where politics comes into it, because as governments come in, they some of them decide that spending money on the arts is not as profitable as they would like, and so they cut these kind of things out. But for now, in Canada, we have the Canada Council, we have the Canadian Media Fund as well. That'll help you. And then, of course, as Mark just pointed out, a number of these things in the States as well, and Georgia, right, where the Walking Dead is produced, right? Georgia, there's a Georgia peach icon you see at the end of that show, which has something to do with funding. All right. So speaking of arcade, there's a new kid in town, Jaime.
Yeah, if you thought, well, maybe I'll switch my environs and grass is green on the other side and go over to Android. It's like, well, Google Play Pass might give you a little bit of pause. So it's launching with no ads, no in-app purchases, more than just games. So it includes non-game apps as well for $4.99 a month US. It looks like it has similar type of family subscription sort of model. This one, Google apparently has stated that engagement with the apps themselves will be part of the way in which apps will get paid more or less. And although it's still an invite-only stage, so not free and clear for anybody to just join, sounds like you can sign up somewhere to express interest in participating.
As a developer, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. To sign up as a developer, not as a user.
Right. And will you get a year's free if you buy a new Pixel Note 3?
I don't see anything here about that, but I don't think the Pixel event has occurred yet, right? In that October coming up?
Yeah, I think so.
I guess we'll see.
I have no idea. I'm being facetious.
I knew you were, but it also seemed like it was plausible too. And I was racking my brain to see, did I see anything like that? And I didn't see anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's interesting. All right. Next thing, so I was talking about this a little bit earlier, that this is an article that I posted, it must have been yesterday, I guess. Apple has also Apple's also released iPad OS, which we talked about at the top of the show. And this link that I've got here goes more specifically into it. Apple has also produced, as Jaime likes to say in the past, lots of different videos on the new things you can do, again, on Apple's YouTube channel, what you can do with this new OS. Talks about some of the things that we're doing. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but last couple of weeks I've been ranting, or I guess last couple of months I've been ranting about text selection in iOS 13, and I don't know if I have something about that, but yeah, apparently I was holding it wrong the whole time. There's a new paradigms for selecting text and things like that, and that applies to the iPad and the iPhone. So yeah, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But we've talked about my experience with my iPad Pro with the new Today view on the home screen, and there's a screenshot of it here. But yeah, so they're talking about the multitasking where you can now slide and pinch from the slide. I've not been able to get that to work, but then again, maybe I haven't got the right level of beta to make that work. So yeah, it's interesting. They've got a screenshot here which looks like 3-camera iPads in them. Did you see that in the screenshot? They're talking about multitasking. Are you guys still there?
I don't see.
They got a picture of the Mac Rumors website, right? You got the Mac Rumors Wikipedia.
Oh, okay. I see in the split view, right?
Mm-hmm. And they got these sort of just leaked. It must be in a real article that they're linking here, but showing iPads with the 3-camera square display, right? But based on what people thought they were going to look like before we actually see what we got in the iPad Pros. iPhone 11 Pros. Anyway, so with the new swipe over mechanism for flipping between apps, instead of previously you'd come back to your home screen and you would sort of kind of gesture upward, and you get these little sort of smaller views of each app. Now you can swipe through apps with the sort of thinner 320 wide multitasking view of each app. So they're talking about here with the new gesture. So the idea is that you take your finger and as you drag it across the type to select a block of text. And what I was doing wrong was normally I would select the text and then I would wait for that little pop-up to show where it says copy or select all or paste or whatever. But what you do now is you highlight the text and with 3 fingers you pinch and it picks up the type. And then you go somewhere else, and then you spread your 3 fingers, and it puts the type down. So if you're switching, so that's the copy and paste gesture. There's a whole series of new gestures that they've added in iOS 13 on the iPad specifically, and I believe that works on the iPhone as well. So you're talking here about, the new home screen, the multitasking slide over thing I talked about. Apple Pencil apparently has lower latency now, more responsive than ever. They changed the way that when you're in photos and you're using the markup tool. I don't know if you guys have used that. It's more like you get a selection of pen types, markers and pencils and things, and you can choose the color you want to use and that kind of stuff. The quick type, which is with the floating keyboard, where you can grab the full size, virtual keyboard, shrink it down, and then you can use the swipe to type thing. I guess you haven't tried that yet, Jaime, because you haven't got iOS 13 yet. Have you tried the swipe to type thing, Mark, yet on your keyboard?
I have tried it.
Yeah. I can't spell well enough to use that.
Yeah, it's kind of. I'm actually using it right now. It's kind of weird. Mm-hmm. As I move around, it's changing the suggestions in the suggestion bar.
Yeah.
Kind of in real time, depending on what I'm looking at. I'm not sure I quite get it yet intuitively how it works.
It's sort of a bit of counterintuitive if you're a touch typer too. too, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know where the keys are on the keyboard, but, you know, I always have trouble with the I before E thing, so I'm sure that would mess it up, but maybe they have logic behind that. Apparently, Safari now has desktop class browsing. I know that because I've been using it for the last couple of months, and when I go to websites now and I'm in landscape mode, I get a full, regular, you know, what you were used to on the desktop kind of Safari experience. So I'm not getting a dumbed down mobile type website, right? And dark mode, which I promised I would talk about again. So one of my things about dark mode was trying to transition from, you know, using dark. I don't use Xcode in sort of dark mode type screen. You know, I'm getting used to reading my mail and things like that in dark mode on both of my devices. But what I've discovered, which I really like, and this works on both machines, both devices, is you can actually go in and based on the time of day turn on dark mode or night mode. And the same thing on the Mac with Catalina, which it came out on Catalina first, where during the day you get the bright white screen with the black text, and at night you get, you know, so around sundown or so it switches over to dark mode with, you know. In
fact, real-time follow-up, when I earlier said that iOS 13.1 had turned off dark mode, it hadn't. I actually had that feature turned on and forgot. So it was still daytime earlier, and now it's gone dark, so it switched over to dark mode.
Yeah, and Photos has changed quite a bit. They've got this new, and this has been in the beta for a while on both 13 and that is when you go to the Photos tab, you can look at your photos clumped together in terms of years, months, or days, and so that's not bad if you consider that, you know, I have the earliest photos I have on my. I even have photos that go back to 1964 on my phone because I've gone in and put the proper dates on them. But, you know, I've had my phone since 2007, 2006, 2007, I guess, 2008. So yeah, I've got photos that are taken on the iPhone, and you can group them that way, or you can click on all photos and get the, you know, the regular collection view that you're used to, and which I tend to go to a lot. But I've been finding that the new this new paradigm of looking at photos, the way they organize them is much you get used to it, and then the album views are a lot easier to use as well, and and the search is getting way better. I don't know if that's anything that our little friend over there has anything to do with. I know it's not, but I'd like to think he does. That the search is getting much better. It's much more intuitive. Like, it's much more. The machine learning is getting better in terms of its algorithms. You can put in words and get images that more or less match what you're looking for. I don't know if there's a way to correct them, but so Photos has changed quite a bit. I'm signed in with Apple. I've not seen anything. I'm not seeing a sign in with Apple show up anywhere yet for me, but and Maps Maps also has dark mode, which I find odd to use during the day when it didn't have that automatic switching over thing that Mark was talking about, right? So one of the things that's coming back in iOS 13.1 is shortcut automations, which apparently were a bit wonky in 13. They went away, now they're back again. So apparently, like I was talking about with my phone blocking callers who I've not interacted with before, they'll automatically go to voicemail. Apparently, you can do the same thing with mail now, right? So you can have them automatically move directly. It says directly to trash. I don't know if I'd do that, but you can have block sender. You can block senders. I guess you can block senders and it'll go to trash automatically. But you know, that's a great idea. But I don't know if you guys have tried this. But when you block senders and you block callers, they just change to a different number or different address, right? Like that's almost a futile effort to try and get rid of them that way. Yeah. So lots of different things. I mean, this goes on for days. We won't spoil all your fun by reading all this for you, but quite a few enhancements in iOS 13.1, which is now available on the iPad OS and as well as iOS. Any comments?
Kind of like in the live view photos in the Photos app.
Well, that's true. Yeah, as you scroll through them.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Harry Potter kind of paradigm where as you swipe through them, they animate, right?
Yeah, I'm watching George Clinton on stage. Right
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you hold your finger down, you'll hear the audio too, right? Did you notice that?
I have headphones on. It's hard to tell.
So I was today I met Gary Kawasaki, and I went to his talk at Elevate in Toronto. But yesterday, the keynote speaker was Chris Hadfield, our Canadian astronaut, the one who did the David Bowie cover. And he was one of not the first one to use Twitter, but his son encouraged him to get on Twitter when he was up in the space station. And so I met him yesterday, and I handed my phone as I was getting him to sign some books for my grandchildren and myself. I handed my phone to one of the guys beside he took a bunch of pictures of me, and there's enough pictures there. So this is an Ask MTJC for our listeners, and maybe some other people will think about this, but there's enough pictures there that I could actually make a video of him signing, because I've gone through them and held down the key, as I said, or held down my finger on them to hear what he's saying, because he's actually talking to me as he's signing, right? Asking me about my grandkids and telling me what his granddaughter's birthday was yesterday and so on and so forth, right? So it'd be interesting to sort of string these images along and make them into a movie. So I know that I've seen ways that you can make live photos into actual movies, but it would be interesting to see if I could get all these together. I mean, I'll throw them into an editing app, but it's just interesting that they could do that, right? Also, I did an iMovie movie today. I don't often do iMovie, but for reasons I had to do one today, and I noticed that the live photos that I put into that also moved around a bit, right? So in the iMovie, the actual, you get the Ken Burns effect, but you also get the animation from the live picture effect. It's all kind of cool stuff happening in iOS 13. Some weirdness, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's super buggy. I've not had like any showstoppers, in terms of things. I mean, I've been kvetching about the things that are driving me crazy about it because they're making me change the way I do things. But other than that, I mean, I've been pretty happy with the update. What do you think, Mark?
I haven't noticed any issues, so that makes me happy.
Right, yeah.
That's good, because ironically, since I was trying to actively avoid 13 until waiting to see what everybody else was doing and how it was performing in the wild, iOS 12 has been doing weird stuff lately.
It's jealous.
My phone would it would unlock, but I couldn't swipe up the notification center. I was like, what?
Oh, really?
I can interact with anything on that screen. In this case, I was playing a podcast. I was able to pause it at the very least, but I literally, no combination of, lock the phone, unlock the phone again, tried to, maybe like a weird accelerometer thing is out of whack. Shake the phone around, just do all sorts of stuff. I had to reboot the phone in order to get it to be happy again. Just got in some confused state where it's like, yes, you can unlock. No, you can't swipe up on the notification center.
Like an animal.
Right? It's bananas. I'm like, how did I hit this particular case? I don't know, but I can't live in the supposedly more solid world of iOS 12 for much longer if it's already doing that to me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Now, what do you guys think of Xcode 11?
Well, that's an interesting story. We'll talk about that in a minute. What are you going to talk about now? I found an interesting scenario that I was telling a colleague about this at work today. So, Device Tracker, as we know, we looked at it last week, and I noticed that one of the titles was black on blue, which is supposed to be white on blue. At least it has been in all the previous iterations of iOS. And I just noticed this on iOS 13. So I went in. I assumed it was dark mode was acting up, and so I was trying to figure out how to opt out of that. And so long story short, in that, what I discovered, it was actually my bad coloring of the title case in the storyboard was the problem. It wasn't dark mode at all. But I had loaded up, because it was dark mode, I thought, well, let me load up in iOS 11 or Xcode 11 and see what the deal was. And I can't get the app to compile. Now, keep in mind, it's an Objective-C app mostly. Right? There's a couple of Swift files, but they're so minimal that they could be 3, 4, or 5 in terms of which Swift are written in. So they're not that matter of fact, but like the main part of the app is written in Objective-C, and I thought that's weird. And I looked at it, and it was complaining about a non-existent selector that was left in the app from 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I have to go back into the code to figure out what was the actual method did, because it doesn't exist anymore. And yet, if I go into 10.21 again, Objective-C, it compiles. So weird that Xcode 11 is looking at Objective-C differently than Xcode 10 does.
Well, have you tried deleting your derived data folder?
Yes, and I've also turned off the new build, using the legacy build to see if that makes a difference. But yeah, it's just weird that I mean, I guess they're being a little bit more using more scrutiny in the compiler in 11, but because it shouldn't have compiled before. I mean, theoretically, if this selector was missing all this time. Like I've gone back into the previous commits. And
in 11 it's missing.
It's missing in 10 as well, but it compiles, right? Because you remember, Objective-C is like a Russian tank. You start it and it just keeps going, right?
Yeah. So there's probably just some warning is now an error. Right. Oh. That happens in every version of Xcode. They make more things warnings and more warnings errors.
Right. Oh, there's been lots of deprecations, that's for sure. I mean, like I've been cleaning up errors, warnings for the last couple of months as I've been going through the betas, right? But yeah, it's weird. Weird.
Overall, I'm loving the editing capabilities. I really like the ability to add multiple editing windows in parallel. That's amazing. Right. I have a pretty nice monitor at work, or a pretty large monitor, and I can just make a huge Xcode and have multiple editing windows. It's really, really, really nice.
Yeah.
One thing though that's driving me nuts is and this has been a continuing thing, is that debugging is becoming impossible.
Really?
Yeah. Now, well, actually, let me ask, have you guys noticed this, or is it maybe just something to do with my local environment? Mm-hmm. When you hit a breakpoint, it will stop at the breakpoint, but I'll get a spinner for like 30 seconds before I get to the console window is available, where the stack shows up.
Yeah.
And then single stepping takes a ridiculously long time. It takes like 10 seconds to do a single step.
Wow.
So it's basically impossible to debug.
So I've had weird things like that. There's actually one bug in 10 that I was hoping goes away too, in 10.21, and I noticed it was a bug that's been reported many, many times. And this is, if I open up an app and I work in it for a bit, or if I've left it open and I go to do a comparison, like for committing, it says it can't load the previous commits. I have to quit Xcode and open it back up again to reload whatever it is that allows it to look at these two different versions. It's almost like git diff doesn't work.
Are you using CocoaPods?
I'm going to say yes.
Is the thing you're looking at inside a pod?
No.
Okay.
No, generally not. But yeah, it's weird. I went to the source of all knowledge, Stack Overflow, and the record of truth, or what do you call it? The record of book of record for all things, Stack Overflow. That's a joke. I start laughing. But it's not funny if I have to explain it. You know that, right? Anyway, is Jaime falling asleep or what?
No, I just don't have anything to add. It feels really weird because I'm
sometimes it's not funny just because it's not funny.
Okay, yeah. So that's funny. Yes, that's true. No, that is also a book of record. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I went back and I checked that other people have been having this issue for a number of versions of Xcode 10, including the betas, and I'm curious to see if that one goes away. But yeah, I have noticed some weird things, but I'm not day to day in Xcode 11 yet, though, Mark. Right? Like, are you fully invested in it, or are you just playing?
I am now. Yep. Oh, okay. I am, because my work computer automatically updated itself. Oops.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Did you use? Are you using the App Store versions of Xcode?
I am.
Yeah, I've stopped. I haven't been using those for many, many years. Right? I've been always going and getting the version from the downloads page. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I've been independent of the MAS, as I like to call it, Mac App Store. Yeah, because the thing was, like, I like to have the flexibility to go back and forth between different OSs. In fact, what I found out was interesting when I mentioned earlier about the Swift version in these apps is that if you have a Swift 3 file, right, in your app, you cannot convert it in Xcode 10 or 11. You have to go back to Xcode 9 to convert it to 4.
Interesting.
And you remember we had that, it supported 3 and 4 at the same time? Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I kind of went weird. So just so happened to have a copy of Xcode 9 handy. Well, actually, you know what I did was I thought, well, the changes here are so minor. Let me just go and see if it'll run anyway. So I just went and raised the environment to 4 on these apps, and sure enough, like I said, there was so little Swift in these files, or so little, I wasn't doing any major gymnastics with them that they just converted to 4 and 5 without too much effort, right? So they'd be able to build. By the way, I just remembered there is something I meant to put into the notes, and I forgot to, but it was a tweet that I saw the other day, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But do you know, Mark, in 11, if you hold the command key down and you go over that little mini, the mini viewer is the mini, yeah. As you scroll up and down that, the names of the methods will pop out, and you can jump right to those methods.
That's kind of the only way that it's useful, actually. Because otherwise it's just too small. You can't see anything. anything.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like a little mini rendered thing. But I thought this tip was cool.
I also do like the way they've rearranged the version control views.
Yeah,
there's nothing new. They've just rearranged it. So now going between the comparison view is just a toggle on and off, and you can select the author or the blame view inside the actual editor.
Oh, really? Okay,
so each editor can have its own little one. You can show the authors, and that's independent of the comparison view.
Yeah, well, nice. I'm starting up Xcode 11 here just to see what you're talking about. Pretty quick too. I don't know if you've noticed that. Like I just clicked on while you were talking there. I just clicked on it to open it, and I'm working on a 2013 Mac, right? So it's nothing great news. So I'm just going to click on this file. So what were you saying? So if I'm looking at the version,
So hold on, let me open it so I can direct.
So where do you find?
So look in the upper right where the blame thing appears to be gone, right? There's that toggle there.
The three little buttons there, no?
Yeah, but it's not actually gone. What you do now is you go to hold on a second. You go down to
this is like just have to interject here. This is like the time I was talking to a Korean friend of mine, not Greg, but another one, in a bar when I first got my iPhone, and I said, "Oh yeah, and you can put Korean on this phone, and you can have the font appear in Korean, and you can have all the language referred to in Korean." He's like, "Oh yeah, really? Show me." So I did, and I changed my phone to Korean. And then I said, "Yeah, see," and he goes, "Yeah, well, yeah, it's Korean, all right." And then I said, "Well, how do I switch it back?" He goes, "I don't know. I don't speak Korean."
Yeah. Okay, so select the text file.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay, now you see the thing on the right that you were just talking about, right?
No, it's gone. Where'd it go? Oh, so I've got the version control turned on. I want to turn that off. Okay. I see.
Yeah, you have to turn it off.
Okay, I've got the ribbon thing. I forget what it's called.
Yeah. So now up at just above the ribbon thing, see there's a
little plus
it looks
thing?
like a little text thing. No, not there.
Oh yeah. Adjust editor
Tap
options.
on that.
Adjust editor options. It says, yeah. Ooh, I can show authors.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, unfortunately, they're all written by me though. Might come across a Mark Rubin, but not likely.
Yeah, it depends on which.
Yeah, it's not this app. Right? Cool. Well, yeah, but if we were remote working, you would have using my computer to edit anyway. Oh, it's interesting. It can actually read the names of what is it? What is this? It's interesting. You know the Pragma marks. You can actually read them. It makes the font slightly larger.
Yeah, I just noticed that too. That's
another reason to use Pragma marks.
Yeah, that makes it a little bit more useful.
Cool. This wasn't going to be a show about Xcode, by the way, folks. Those of you driving at home. I'm just saying. Just saying. Oh, here I've got a breakpoint here. Well, mind you, I can't get this app to compile, so we can't use this one as an example. This is the app that I was telling you that I can't compile. Yeah. Some of these files were written in 2010. Again, for those of you driving at home, started back then. Cool. Yeah, lots of neat little things in Xcode 11.
So I'm liking Xcode 11 except for the debugging, which is pretty annoying.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't know. Actually, maybe some of the viewers or listeners could chime in with their experiences.
Sure.
I don't know if this is something particular to the project that I'm working in, because it is a pretty complicated project with a bunch of dependencies and pods and stuff like that. So that might have something to do with it.
Right.
I'd be curious to hear what other people are experiencing.
Right. By the way, folks, we're still in the middle of follow-up. So we have one last follow-up item here, and that is, and this comes out of the category of eventually everything's follow-up. This is our follow-up on the other App Store, if you'll remember back from season number 1, I think episode 3. There's a new App Store in town called AltStore. Now, I don't know much about it, because I just found out about it like maybe an hour before the show, but I've got the page here. It's altstore.io. It says, welcome to the AltStore, and they claim that they've got this new paradigm for installing apps by you run an alt server on your Windows or Mac device, and you're able to install apps that they're maintaining somehow. Similar to, I guess, how Setapp works on the Mac, where I'm still running Setapp, by the way. You pay so much per month for Setapp, and then they have this curated set of apps, which are freely available on the App Store or through developer websites. But they kind of like Clean My Mac is Paul, what's the name of the people who run this setup thing? I guess it's similar to that, but for iOS. Have you guys heard anything about this or seen this at all?
I'm looking at the website right now. It doesn't give
tell you
any
much,
information except the download link.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wonder how long this is going to exist.
Well, they claim without jailbreaking, right? So
Right. They might be using some kind of MDM type solution or managed device. But I don't know. That's in the gray area of legality.
Well, it'll be interesting, folks, to see how long these guys are around for. But for now, they're there. So.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that maybe there's some sort of environment, because I mean, what's their pricing model? Can developers join their group as well, right? So strange, but it's weird that it came up. Maybe it's a Russian website or something that's trying to steal money
or infect your phone with viruses.
Yeah. Oh, look, they've got this Russian prince has $5 million that I can get access to.
Or is it only their apps that are being installed?
I don't know, but there's a name here, Riley Testut. I'm not sure. Maybe he's the owner. We'll have to find out more about it. I just stumbled across it today. Know nothing about it other than that. But that's it. So I guess we can move on to the main part of the show, which we've covered some of this stuff already. But interesting here that the first one here I've got is talking about the Toy Hall of Fame finalists, and unlike what the headline says here in this link from the Associated Press, I saw this in another paper, but it's interesting that the smartphone, along with the Care Bear, some Fisher-Price toys, Masters of the Universe, the game Risk, My Little Pony, Jenga, and Max Force, or Madhorn, I don't know who that is, and Matchbox Cars, which are, I guess the American version of Corgi. Is it American Matchbox? I don't know. But and Nerf Blaster.
Yep, Matchbox Cars, like Hot Wheels. But
Corgi and Dinky Toy are British ones that I'm familiar with. But yeah, just the smartphone itself is going under the. I'm sure my grandkids will attest to this. But going into the toy possible candidates for Toy Hall of Fame. Cool. All right.
It's a little strange, but at the same time, it kind of makes sense when you think about how pervasive gaming is now in the modern smartphone era than it ever was before.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I guess are like PlayStation and Xbox in the Toy Hall of Fame? I don't know much about it. I'm sure they are. But anyway, it doesn't say anywhere about casting your balance. But so in the next two tips, these are kind of two together. The first one says upgraded to iOS 13. Here, start with these 8 tips. The next one is 25 tips actually on new things in iOS 13. So we'll just quickly skim through some of them. We talked about dark mode. One of the cool things about dark mode is you can press and hold on the brightness setting, and at the bottom of the screen you'll see that you can turn True Tone, Night Shift, and you can turn dark mode on and off right from the, what do you call that, control screen? What's that overlay called? Control panel? Control center, right?
I believe it's Control Center.
Yeah, it probably says in the text if I just read, yes, Control Center. And then, as we mentioned before, you can turn on you can set the dark mode to work based on automatic, and you can set the time when the dark and light. You can do it with sunrise to sunset, as I mentioned before, but you can also create your own custom time for when dark mode will kick in. The volume HUD has a new overlay, and I think this applies to AirPods as well. You'll see like when you're adjusting the volume, you now get a graphic which kind of shows you with a much wider view, similar to what you see in the Control Center. You can now download files in Safari, which I actually had to do today. I mean, we'll attest. Locations. Oh, one of the cool things I think is if you go to the Control Center and you press and hold, that area where you get the airplane mode, the Bluetooth mode, cellular mode, I guess. And but if you press and hold on that square, and then you click on the Wi-Fi icon, you get a new. No, is it not working for me now? You get the ability to choose a Wi-Fi network from the Control Center now. So if you're coming into a zone where you're not automatically connected to one, you can choose one. Like I do this every day. I get on the subway, and the subway has Wi-Fi in Toronto on the main line, and so I switch over to their internet while I'm waiting for a train to come. Right, and it used to be that you had to go into system settings. You had to click on the Wi-Fi icon. And you had to like do 3 or 4 clicks to get to this level, and then the train would arrive. Right, but so now I can immediately, as soon as I get into the station, just use this shortcut to get in there.
Well, the flashlight has a new control as well. If you press and hold,
if you do long press,
it's got the same kind of concept as the volume control where you slide up and down.
I hate to say this, but I think that was in iOS 12 as well.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, Jaime can try that one out. But and the new cut, copy, and paste gestures, which I talked about for using the 3-finger pull, and as a way to cut. I think the 3-finger pinches will cut the text to do that. Right. New undo and redo gestures. I'm still shaking my phone to undo, but you don't have to do that anymore. There's a new formatting bar that's appearing as well. I'm just going to whip through some of these things here. Some of the ones that really caught. Oh, the photo editor is really nice in iOS 13. This is on iPad and iPhone. You can adjust brightness and the shadows, highlights. You can adjust cropping. You can adjust a number of things. You can apply filters, like custom filters yourself based on each photo. You can trim live photos as well. And video editing right in the Photos app is really kind of cool. I'm going to skip that next one because I don't know anything about it because I'm not a girl. What else? This is cool. Oh, you can turn off. This comes back to the Bluetooth thing we were talking about at the top of the show. You can actually go into the Bluetooth panel and turn off Bluetooth on specific apps as well. So if you forgot to turn that off, if you just okayed the message to get it out of the way, you can save favorites locations in maps now. So if you want to go from work to home, and although you always had work, you can find your parked car, that kind of thing. You can add favorites in there, which is kind of cool. Let's see, navigation stuff. We'll skip that.
I was kind of curious about the new editing panel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
how well about that. Yeah, it works, because it was like, okay, I get that the shortcut gesture probably doesn't work too well, because I've also had trouble with like shortcut gestures like that. But how does the sort of tappability of using that new editing panel work? Does it seem pretty good?
You mean like the little thing with the pen and the markers I was talking about before? For markup?
No, not the markup. Let me get the specific. Is it?
Number 31 is what I was talking about with the toggling Wi-Fi and Bluetooth from Control Center. That's that one.
No.
I'm following up on what I was saying earlier. The battery
number
health is
6
cool.
on the iPhone Hacks article.
Sorry, which one?
Use new cut, copy, and paste gestures, and it shows like a little panel and then number 8 is sort of related to it, the new formatting bar. Like from the screen, it looks kind of small, but it's kind of hard to tell like how that sort of lines up with thumb size. Mm-hmm.
I heard something interesting today. It was just somebody was posting a slide on LinkedIn, and it said, "Good developers copy, great developers paste." No, nothing from you guys. Are like dead to the world today. I'm telling you, nothing. You should have heard the pause, folks, which I'll probably edit out. What was I saying? I'm way past where I was going. Yeah, I'm going to skip all the emoji. You can custom make your emoji. Who cares? Automatically close Safari tabs is nice. You can, after a month, you can have it close your tabs if you leave them open. I tend to leave a lot of them open. That's one. Oh, the battery health. This is cool. We were talking about this the other day at work. There's been a lot of issues with battery. You can actually tell it when you're charging the battery to top it off at like 86%, because apparently there's some issue with keeping your battery charged at 100% all the time. Like if you always have it plugged in or always sitting on your key charger, you can have it set to 86%, so it never really fully charges, which is apparently better for the health of the battery. And you get a much better graphic in terms of your activity and how long it's been doing it. You can turn on automized battery charging as well, which is nice. App Store stuff. Let's see. There's like 50 things in this article. It's crazy. It goes on for days. Bookmarks, unzip files now. Oh, you can create folders in the files section of your phone. You can actually create a folder now of your own instead of having to use the application folders that are presented for you. You can do full page screenshots in Safari, which I haven't tried yet. Didn't even know about that. Oh, the share sheet. Okay, here, don't get me started on a share sheet because I'm not a big fan of the share sheet. Have you tried that out, Mark?
I have not.
Yeah,
a new share sheet?
Yeah, it's quite, so you click on it, there are some nice things, like if you airdrop to people near you, you'll see their names pop up in a sort of short list across the top. You can still choose airdrop, messages, mail, reminders, whatever, notes. Those are sort of defaults. You can change which ones are there, but as you scroll down, copy is sort of there, but then there's like, I'm looking at this one particular instance where there's like download video, download YouTube MP3. That would be nice. Maybe if I could do that today. InstaSave, make PDF. It depends on the context of what you're doing, but the share sheet changes and gives you a bunch of options, and you can choose which apps appear in that menu across the sideways sliding collection view that I was talking about earlier. You can choose those to go across there. That's tip number 49 in this thing. And you can save screenshots to files instead of to your photos, which is, I guess, it's nice for not cluttering up your photos with your photo library with screenshots. That's nice too. But those are the best tips this is from PhoneHacks.com.
Oh, this is interesting. Have you tried this no paywall thing?
No, no. Where's that one? What number is that?
So go to Safari. I don't know what number it is. I was playing around with the share sheet. Go to Safari and open the share sheet.
Okay.
And then scroll all the way to the bottom of the share sheet of these options.
Oh, look, no paywall. Wow.
No paywall.
Thanks,
Tap
Apple.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going into this outlining mode where I guess it's pulling out whatever is available without the paywall and making it a nice, viewable, readable form. That's pretty nice. Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Interesting to see if that works, right?
Well, so I'm going to go to a site that I know about. It's a news site that is always spamming me with emails that I tap on it and it hit a paywall all the time.
Really?
You can probably guess which one it is.
Does it end with Journal?
No,
Times?
not that particular one, but it's one of them.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm doing our local version of that because that one's just as bad. And it seems to be. Well, I should find one of the actual articles that they send me or emails that they send, but I haven't deleted.
By the way, real-time follow-up. The person who did the presentation at the keynote that we talked about, or the event back in September, I just found his name is Greg Joswiak. We called him Jaws in the conversation, but his name is Greg Joswiak. And I just stumbled across it playing around with Safari here. Anywho. Yeah,
I mean, so Jaws cool. Seems like an okay nickname if you think of the former, I want to say, Philadelphia Eagles in the NFL quarterback Ron Jaworski that they call Jaws.
Well, the name is very similar to Wozniak, right? It's Joswiak, right? So we call Woz W-O-Z, right? When it's W-O-S, right? And this guy's name is J-O-S-W-I-A-K. So Woz and Jaws. I guess he's the new Jaws over at Apple.
So unfortunately, this doesn't work for that website. It when I hit the no paywall thing, it just comes up with a screen that says "Not supported. We're sorry, but this URL is not supported by Apple." Oh, well.
Yeah, I get similar things like that with that other tool we were using before. I forget what it's called to do the no paywall thing, but that does happen. I've seen that. I also get these. It's funny when I use a bunch of paywall blockers or ad blockers, and I often go to websites where they go, please turn your ad blocker off so we can make some money. You know? Yeah. Okay. Sure. Anywho, Jaime, you're up next with some. Apple says it'll make a Mac Pro in Texas. Oh, did I just give away the lead?
I mean, it's more or less what the story is. There's not a ton to this story here. Just that rather than manufacturing the newer Mac Pro in China,
new cheese grater,
the new cheese grater Pro is going to be manufactured or at least final assembled. It's always unclear precisely where it falls in that line, but that'll be done in Austin, Texas, in the USA. Apparently,
cool.
Apple was able to get some tariff breaks, I guess, or exemptions more specifically from the current administration. So they're not going to be hit on this particular product by those ongoing China and USA trade war tariff sort of things going on.
So here's a branding question for you guys, right? When you saw the title said Mac Pro, did your mind think of the black cylinder monolith or the new cheese grater Mac Pro?
Cheese grater.
Really?
Yep.
As soon as I saw Mac Pro, my brain just filled in with the black cylinder. And then when I saw the picture of Tim Cook and that guy who quit, Johnny Ive.
But it says new right in front of it.
No. So. Yes, it does say new Mac Pro. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I guess the scars they run deep.
Yeah, I guess so.
They run deep.
I mean, it was around for a long time, right? That particular style. So, we haven't really gotten to the point at which people have these Mac Pros out and about in the field in enough quantity for you to have physically seen one on multiple occasions. So it kind of makes sense. I get what you're saying. I can see why you would sort of stick in your brain, as the first mental flash you see when you see.
Although the original cheese grater was also called Mac Pro, if you remember, right? The before 10s, the 2K Mac Pro. Yeah. All right. Got another story for us there, Jaime?
Yeah, this one also gets dangerously close to politics, but we'll keep it pretty much non-political. So you may or may not have seen on the interwebs that a bit of stuff went on with Chef. So Chef is the system administration tool. I might be misrepresenting it, but that's sort of roughly what it is for this particular circumstance. But it's also beyond just being an open source tool. It's got a company related to it that makes money off of stuff like contracts. And in this case, I contract with the ICE, that's ICE, department within the U.S. administration. And just given what's going on there, it's kind of understandable that some of its employees, current and former, would say, hey, like, I don't know that I want my code to be associated with that. And very similar to what ended up happening to NPM, if you remember the kick left pad thing that happened a few years ago, where somebody pulled their third-party library from a repository and it caused all sorts of chaos as stuff broke. That happened here too. Apparently Chef had a thing, it's called Sugar, do they describe here? Let's pretend it's called Sugar because I'd read it somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay.
This plugin that's like apparently very useful, very common for Chef users. This person pulled that code out of the repo and chaos ensued as all sorts of scripts and stuff broke. So ops and system administrators and DevOps folks had a very, very awful day around that time. Sort of subsequent to this, Chef had originally come out and said, like, hey, it's hard for us to pick and choose. We're not really doing this off of money, blah, blah, blah. We're going to continue the contract. And then like a day or two later, they said, you know what? We're not going to continue this contract anymore. It's just not worth the hassle because of all the outcry from them employees.
Wow.
So there's a lot to unpack here. I think the two main ones that come up into mind are, one, third-party stuff and controlling your own stack is super important. I mean, this is the second time that this kind of thing where somebody has removed something from a repository has broken builds and stuff. So whether it's NPM or Chef, or if you're using CocoaPods or any other thing that might depend on some other thing that you don't have control of, I think, limiting your exposure where possible in terms of not using third-party stuff is good. But where it's not feasible, doing things like, for example, cloning repositories and stuff to make sure that you're building off of your copy at the very least. Yes, it adds extra management overhead, but it does reduce the likelihood that this sort of thing will blow you up.
So in this case, and the one about the Node.js guy who pulled his thing from NPM, the developer who pulled the code is not an employee of Chef, as you're saying, right? So it's not like they could say, well, you're touching our stuff, right? This is a third-party dependency kind of thing, right?
I believe so. It was...
And it looks like it's open. It was open source. So he may or may not have written this stuff while he was an employee. It's not clear.
Yeah.
But it's stuff that was open source under his name. So not much the company, and he's not an employee anymore. So there's not much the company can do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And people were bringing up weird sort of license related things. There is no open source license out there, just to be really clear, that requires you to host something, right? It has responsibilities about, disclosures and distribution of source and that sort of thing, providing copies and stuff. But it never has one that like, hey, like this license requires you to continue to host this thing forever.
Right,
so I think regardless of what you feel sort of on the political reason side, like there was no obligation for this individual to keep their source code up and available for anybody to use.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've all seen that over time. People go off and get another job, or get a day job, or decide to go flip burgers for a living. Stuff disappears. Yeah. And you if you want to use it, you got to fix it yourself, or write something similar yourself, right? Over time. Third-party dependencies, right?
Yep.
All right. We have arrived at our picks section of the show. And Jaime, you got a couple of picks for us?
A couple picks. First one is a blog post and a source code repository by a friend of the show and longtime patron, Sean Marston. So he's talking here on his warnings blog about pretty much a recap of the content he covered in a very excellent 5-minute lightning talk at iOS Dev UK in Aberystwyth.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of covers the use case of like, okay, so you've got this app out there, maybe you're using it in beta and you really want to make it easier for your beta users to report bugs. But it's a real hassle because like, all right, they have to, even with something like iOS 13, so I got to take a screenshot, I got to mark up the photo, but then, like which operating system were you using, what device were you on, what version of the app were you on? Like there's all sorts of stuff that's like a real hassle.
Mm-hmm.
And he shows here just a real easy way that you can listen for the, programmatically listen for the screenshot notification and capture that and use that with your own sort of home rolled, like, let me take stats about about, what version of the app was being used here and what sort of context was this in. Make it super simple to compose a email that can be sent by your beta user back to you. Say, hey, I was doing this thing. I expected it not to crash, and it crashed. And at the very tail end of the article, he has a link to the code on GitHub. It's pretty nice.
Cool.
Yeah, it's nice to see that this is a simple free solution, because there are companies and libraries out there that will charge you quite a bit to do exactly the same thing. I've used some of them in the past, and they don't do much more than this. They'll link with Jira and stuff like that. But
nice. Cool. So what's next? Oh wait, we already spoiled this one, sort of.
Yeah, we teased this one, and if you're following us on Twitter in our omni-channel advertising strategy, I'm sure you may have seen this. So by the time this recording goes out, it will be almost time for Hacktoberfest 2019. So what is this? This is a promotion being run in partnership by GitHub, DigitalOcean, and Dev, that's DEV, the sort of medium for programmers sort of community. Mm-hmm. This is, I don't remember how many years they've done this. I'm sure I could find out. It's like third or fourth year. It's a really cool way to get people who are new to open source, new to software development, just get them involved in the community. So the idea is that you sign up for this program. They've made it really easy for repository maintainers and project maintainers to add tags to their repo that says hey, this is a really easy first-time contributor sort of problem, or this is a task that we'd love to do, but anybody could really do it, and it'd be a good way to get your feet wet in terms of learning how code works, learning how working in the open source community works. And as a bonus, if you complete, what did they say this year? Between October 1st and October 31st, if you have 4 pull requests that you make, and they do have to be legitimate ones, they can't be spam, legitimate pull requests, even if it's something like, fixing typos in the documentation, the kind folks at GitHub, DigitalOcean, and Dev will send you a nice t-shirt. And I've done this for the last couple of years. I have 2 really cool, really nicely done, well-designed, good quality t-shirts. And so I definitely encourage folks to take a look. Well, I have the link to sign up to that and find out about events that may or may not be going on in your area. I know that there's an event going on in Seattle. I saw that there was one in Toronto. I know there's a few going on in London and San Francisco area. So take a look at the website. Be in the show notes for those of you driving at home.
So I have some questions. So I was just a mentor at a hackathon on the weekend called, as part of Elevate conference, which is happening in Toronto right now as we record. But it's called the Elevate Tech Jam, which is a hackathon that runs on Saturday and Sunday of last week, the 20th, let's say, of September. In that case, you put together a team and you enter and you go and you sit at a conference table with a team of 5 to 6 developers, or 4 to 6 developers, and you work on some tasks that are put together by the sponsors, and in this case TD Bank, Rogers Media, and Chorus. I think Media were there as well. And you work on the project for the weekend. So is this similar to like a NaNoWriMo thing where you participate online, you sign up online, and you do it from the comfort of your own home kind of thing, or are you putting together a team, or how does this work?
Yeah, that's a good point. So it is closer to you can do it from the comfort of your own home in your jammies. You can do it as part of, like a team if you have something that you're really excited about building. It's a little bit different than the hackathons and other sort of events that you've participated in, Tim, where it's not like there isn't like a winner, right? It's not like a contest, and it's not around any particular theme other than, join the open source community or help somebody join the open source community.
Right.
There are, of course, events, as I mentioned, like, for example, looking here in the Seattle area, there is one hosted by Circle CI and Pulumi, where they'll teach folks about what Hacktoberfest is and introductions to Circle CI and Pulumi. And then for an hour and a half, they'll have people just sort of hacking on that stuff, and sort of presumably those individuals will go around helping others understand, hey, I'm running into trouble here. How does this work? And just really get people sort of involved.
Right. So I clicked on the more events link here, and it shows that there's Hacktoberfest things going on in Australia, Perth and Melbourne, some in Brazil, lots in Brazil actually, a couple in Canada, one in Quebec City, or Trois-Rivières, one in Edmonton, one in Montreal, one in Toronto, Quebec City, some in Chile, France, Germany, lots in Germany, some in India. We've got them in Ireland, Italy,
Japan, Kenya, Mexico,
Mexico.
If you are
Nigeria,
if you are a city out there,
Poland.
there's a pretty decent chance that there's one on this official list. There, I would say check all your other sort of normal event and meetup group type things, because there are other. I don't see the San Francisco one on here, but I must have seen it through some other.
United States is down below, I believe. Yeah, because you've got UK here, London, a couple in London, Manchester. There's one in St. Petersburg in Russia, New York City, Memphis, Fort Worth, Salt Lake City, Chattanooga. Pardon me, boys. Is that Chattanooga, Choo-Choo, Nashville, Atlanta, Akron, Louisville? Virtual event. Ooh, that was an interesting place. I wonder if they have a virtual president. Ann Arbor. There's Seattle there. It's October 15th, Jaime. Was it Seattle you were saying?
Yep.
No. Mm-hmm. Salt Lake City. Yeah, there's lots of them. And Zambia as well.
Bay Area. That's kind of crazy.
Bay Area.
Yeah, I know I saw something. I must have seen like a tweet or something that somehow isn't on this official list. And they actually do have an event kit. So if you're interested in organizing your own meetup, there's stuff to help you do that. And I would also mention that there are other companies that might participate sort of separately, even if they're not officially part of the Hacktoberfest team. For example, last year I happened to come across something that Microsoft was doing of contribute to one of their repositories and get a different T-shirt. So I did. I ended up finding the Cortana Skills documentation repository that needed some documentation love. So I was able to help for that, and I have a delightful T-shirt because of that.
So I headed over to their GitHub, and I see JavaScript, Python, Java, PHP, HTML, Go, C#, C++, Ruby, and CSS. I don't see Objective-C, and I don't see Swift. I don't see Swift UI.
Are you talking about on the hacktoberfest.digitalocean.com page? Or where are you looking? Because there's a Browse More on GitHub.
Browse More on GitHub. Yeah, I clicked there.
So if you go on to... Oh, this looks a little bit different. So I was going to say languages on the left-hand side.
Right.
Maybe it's under advanced search, and then I have to choose languages like Swift, because that's how I ended up doing it last year.
Swift is in that list.
Yep. If you go to advanced in the big Monzo list.
Maybe we can put together an MTJC group.
Intuit Card Parts. Swift Island, which is a conference, I think, in the Netherlands. Their Island app. So if you go for the main page, hit Browse More on GitHub.
Right.
And then on the...
Under climate change or under Hacktoberfest?
Hacktoberfest's the first list that has all these different languages and different things. So you click on that, and if you click on the advanced search, so if you look on the left-hand side, there's the languages list.
Search. Yeah.
So it has the big one, advanced search, and then if you choose written in this language, which is like the fourth option down, and you look at the mega list.
Yeah. Swift. Yeah.
So now you're looking for that, and you can find stuff.
Search.
All sorts of good stuff.
Oh, cool. Swift Package Manager. Okay. And these are Hacktoberfest projects?
I mean, they're ones that have been tagged by people to say, like, hey, we're participating in Hacktoberfest. We've gotten issues that are, of the right caliber for people participating in Hacktoberfest. Like, generally more newbie stuff. I don't imagine they'll be like, completely re-architect the app to be a reasonable request for Hacktoberfest. So you just have to
create a user story and then people hack away at it? Is that the idea?
I mean, you could create your own. I mentioned for my previous pick that Sean Marston has his own little repo for the example code. If you said, hey, like there's this cool thing that might be interesting, I can't speak on Sean's behalf, but you could certainly open up a pull request of like, hey, fix some typos, or made this work in iOS 11.1 or some other sort of thing that might need some love.
Well, here's one called Replace RX Swift with Combine. And then there's one that used dynamic type and support dynamic type on a Mentor detail screen. Yeah. I think we could come up with something, don't you think? Make a podcast app.
I was talking about making an app.
I know you were. That's what I'm saying. Well, here's our opportunity. Let's figure out some user stories and get the monkeys to make it for us. Not that you people are monkeys. Sorry. Yeah. I'm thinking of the 1,000 monkeys typing eventually write a novel or a sentence or whatever it is. What was your idea, Mark? What were you? Are you just talking generally about an app?
Yeah. Remember, I had the idea a while back that we should have as one of the ongoing topics for the show. We should all build an app and talk about what we did each week.
Sure.
That never happened.
iPhone XS Max Mac support. Well, how about that? Yeah, I think we could probably come up with something. Yeah, sounds interesting. I might sign up just for the sake of kicking the tires here, Jaime, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you were going to do anything at all on GitHub during the month of October, if nothing else, you get a free cool T-shirt out of it. Just make sure you sign up for this program. Not to make it about extrinsic value. And if you're out there, you're wondering, like, how do I get started in development? How do I get started in open source? This is a really good way and a good time to get your feet wet. A lot of people giving attention to this. I guess, people out there who end up trying this, hit us up on Twitter, #AskMTJC. Tell us about your experience. Sure. Or maybe even, granted, you have limited opportunities to do this because this is a weekly show. Maybe you can even let us know about your repositories that you're looking for a little help with, and we can help spread the word.
Sure. All right, cool. So I think I kind of spoiled my own pick here as well because I mentioned it earlier. Again, getting all my stuff mixed up. But yeah, this one is just a link that Mac Rumors just put together of all the videos that Apple's published for the new iPad OS on their YouTube channel. There's one here called How to Use Slide Over, Multitask with Split View. Another one called Use Text Editing Gestures. Which is focus videos on these new features on the iPad OS. I'm rolling my eyes as I say that. And how to use Type faster on an iPad with QuickPath, which is that new, shrink the keyboard down and then use your finger to scrub across the keys instead of hunting and pecking as some of us do. And some also on the new Apple Pencil features as well. So and they've got a link to their dedicated iPad game or iPad guide, they say here. So yeah, check that out. That's an interesting one. And my next pick is, this comes via our friend Marin Torov, who's been a co-host on the show. And it's funny that he would post this, but he's found a link. He's sent a link here from the Swift UI Lab talking about advanced Swift UI transitions. And so it shows buttons fading in and out and the code behind that. More interesting things like buttons shrinking away, buttons moving across the screen, as well as iris opening up images and that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting stuff, like a view sliding in like the scroller in Star Wars kind of effect. Pictures transitioning from one image to another using different effects, like similar to the old PowerPointy kind of things, with like opening up and closing like Venetian blinds or those old billboards. So yeah, if you're interested in, of course you are interested in Swift UI, why would you get this far into the podcast without knowing about it? Check out these different effects, and I'll have a link in the show notes for this one. Nothing? Crickets?
I think, well, I haven't, so the reason I couldn't participate too much in earlier Xcode 11 discussion is I haven't really focused on iOS development that much for the past month or so, with the job change that we've mentioned. So, developer advocate now, which means I'm sort of polyglot when it comes to all sorts of different languages and stuff that I'll have to deal with and be at least vaguely familiar with. So I haven't really messed a whole lot with Xcode 11 recently. Swift UI is definitely top of mind of like, wow, I definitely need to get with that and combine, sit down and really hammer out through some of this stuff. But I do think as sort of a meta thing that for folks who are kind of wondering, like, how can I, jump on this train, right? So the iOS business has been going on for more than 10 years now, and I've definitely heard from a lot of newer folks and newer to software development folks that they're pretty intimidated. And I think, what, this is actually a really good time, because I think very similar to the way that Swift sort of brought some new blood and brought us a whole bunch of folks that are now people I could probably name, and I won't, just to not call them out because it seems a little weird. But there are definitely people that you say, wow, I know who those people are and I can name them because, in my opinion, because Swift existed as of 2014, right? Like otherwise, if it was just, still Objective-C, you'd sort of still have the old guard of folks and it'd be crowding out, any sort of new ideas, new discussion. I think Swift UI has a real good chance of, and combined, has a really good chance of doing the same. So if you're out there wondering thinking like, how can I, newbie, do conference talks? How can I do blog posts and podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff? Like, I think this is a pretty good opportunity because everybody out there is a super newbie when it comes to SwiftUI. Even the people who have like written books and done other things. Like, there are some people who are very good at picking up technology. They pick it up really quickly, but unless you're getting something from like the handful of people who actually developed as an Apple, everybody is, pretty much on the same level playing field. So kind of going in the same drumbeat about Hacktoberfest. If you wanted to start doing even just experimental stuff in your own repositories, working with a friend or something, doing SwiftUI stuff, combined stuff, I think paying attention to this and doing that will give you an opportunity to sort of get your face out there and get known. And I'm really excited to see that there will be some new faces of like, oh yeah, like I had never heard of this person before. And now like they are the rock star. Like, look at this person who's done all this cool stuff with SwiftUI. Looking forward to that. Only vaguely related to this article, other than like, oh, that looks really cool. I didn't know you could do that with just like 3 lines of code.
By the way, there is one more thing. I forgot about this, but I just found the link to it. Let me grab it. The URL. This is different than anything we talked about today. Hang on. Here it comes.
In the spirit of Greg Hio Shadow Picks.
Yeah.
Getting a live link here.
So I read this one, this article yesterday or the day before. It must have been the day before. Called Transforming Operators in Swift Combine Framework. Map versus flat map versus switches to latest. Just thought it was interesting, some of the things you can do. And this talks about, and it may have been pointed out to me by Marin, I'll give him credit for this one again, about the difference with in Combine, as I understand it, you are working with publishers as opposed to just straightforward objects, right? So you can transform publishers using flat map. You can't do it with map, as I read this, right? So you can convert things in Combine. It's just an interesting thing. It's a short read. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to scan it real quick. I'll wait.
Oh, I see. I'm not super familiar with Combine, but just knowing what little I do of map and it's saying flat map, it seems quite appropriate. And switch to latest is actually pretty well named because I kind of guessed what it was going to be based on the name. And browsing this, it looks like it does kind of what you would expect based on the name. This is interesting. So yeah, so it tell me if I'm wrong here, Tim, but it looks like they're talking about how with map you can just sort of nicely perform operations on everything that comes
each
through.
Member of an array, exactly. Yeah.
Flat map, kind of like true map, as I like to say, true compact map, is the one that says, is this nil? All right, whatever, just move on with your life. I'll just skip that particular one. And switch to latest will give you the latest and greatest thing, like an example of the latest and greatest network request response, even if things came out of order. Does that sound right?
It says right on the tin here that the flat map transforms publishers into a completely new publisher, which you could then subscribe to, I suppose. What do you think, Mark?
So map just operates on something
like each member of an array runs through a map, right?
Sorry, yeah, it just applies to each element of an array, exactly. But flat map lets you pull out, if you have a hierarchical structure, you can pull stuff out into a single level thing. So say you have just a general flat map would be, say you mapped over a set of tuples, right? And you want to convert that into just a single list,
right?
Where each one is on its own level. Each one is on the same level instead of being hierarchical inside the tuples. That's what flat map does. That's different than compact map, which goes out the nils. That's why they split. Remember, compact map used to be flat map,
right?
And then they split them out. So now for the particular case here of using it for a publisher, I have to see exactly why they're doing that. So you reach into the inner publisher to get its elements, is what it's saying.
All right. Well, we can leave this for the viewers to paw it.
The danger of the shadow picks. I was completely wrong and unprepared to give advice. This is why.
I just thought it was interesting.
I'm not a lawyer.
Little
I'm
article
not a
here. Just another way of looking at, as all this stuff happens. You were just mentioning before that none of us are experts at this stuff because it's all pretty new. So it caught my eye. I read through it. Made sense yesterday, but now I'm too tired to think about it. Anyway, all right. Well, I guess that's it for another week. So hey, Jaime, if people want to get in touch with you on the interwebs, where would they look?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithTheHair.
All right. And Mark, if people want to get in touch with you?
Mark R. at smapsoft.com.
All right. My name is Tim Mitra, TIMMITRA on the Twitcher machine is the best way to get hold of me. And so until next time, we'll say bye-bye. Bye.
Goodbye.
If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the More Than Just Code website at mtjc.fm. You can get in touch with us on the website or follow us on Twitter at mtjc_podcast. If you have feedback or questions, send us a tweet with the hashtag AskMTJC. If you like the show, please consider recommending us to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount at patreon.com/mtjc. You can find details on how to help us out on our website at mtjc.fm/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
My internet went out mysteriously today, and a colleague who's out in Missouri had his internet do bad things today. Kind of makes me suspicious that something else is going on, people probing the infrastructure.
Those damn Democrats, I'm telling you. If it wasn't for the Democrats, everything would be fine, and those Ukrainians playing around with Biden and stuff. I'm telling you. That's what it's all about. Indeed. I went and saw Cheech and Chong the other day, and they were super funny, of course. And some of the humor, they had Jonathan going, "Oh my god," he was laughing, but he's like, "Oh my god," right? The extent to which they didn't hold anything back. But Tommy Chong had a sort of solo section, and he started talking about Justin Trudeau, and the room erupted in boos and catcalls, and because you've heard about his latest scandal, right?
Is there a newer one?
No, I mean it's such a non-issue. I mean, he was a theater teacher. You're going to put on makeup and you're going to enter a role. I mean, unfortunately, the one. My question is this: has he ever dressed up as Mr. Spock and put on green face? Is that so? Do we have a green face scandal now?
I don't know about that one because Spock's face wasn't green though.
What's that?
Spock's face wasn't green though.
Yeah, it was. If you look at the original shows, he's got green makeup on because he had green blood.
I mean, so slight tint.
Yeah, well, it's TV green, right? But still, yeah. If you look at the new high res guys, the high res versions, he's much greener than I mean, he's much paler, I guess, than McCoy or Kirk, who are very red blooded, sort of thing. So he wasn't like the Gorn monster or whatever that episode was on the other day, but. Yeah, but he was green. He definitely they definitely tinged his skin, But anyway, my point is, if you dressed up as a Vulcan, and you put on slightly green makeup, is that offensive to the race of Vulcans? I forgot who it was, but somebody said, there is only one race, the human race, right?
Yeah, I understand the sentiment behind that one, but I think it goes slightly too far, because then it's so tell me, what sorts of attributes might we expect related to sickle cell anemia, right? And it would definitely hit a very particular genotype. Yeah, now, I definitely
sickle cell anemia. What?
That's where your blood cells are shaped kind of like sickles, instead of being circles,
they're not
and so they don't carry as much oxygen, so you get anemic.
Right, okay, yeah. And don't you turn blue in that case, like if you have low red blood cells or whatever, or smaller red blood cells?
Probably. I don't know for certain the symptoms of it.
Well, there's also jaundice. You've heard of jaundice? Where I think, is that a high uric acid or something? You turn yellow,
Yeah. I mostly think of that being associated with newborns.
Yeah. Hello.
I'm back. That was weird.
We're back. Yes, we're recording now, just so you know.
Okay. What about newborns?
We were talking about the fact that my internet went out sort of mysteriously today.
Yeah.
And so did my colleague out in Missouri. So I was wondering if something weird was going on. People poking at the infrastructure, trying to do stuff.
Yeah, but then we were talking about skin color and Justin Trudeau. Oh, I was talking about Tommy Chong, right? So
we got the booze talking about, hey man, what about this Trudeau, right?
So it's so funny, so the crowd that's at Cheech and Chong. Imagine who the clientele who partake in Cheech and Chong type shows, right? So in Canada we have legalized pot, right? We've had it for a couple of 6 months now, whatever. It was Justin Trudeau who stood up and made sure that bill passed, right? And so the same crowd that is enjoying the privileges of smoking pot in Canada are booing Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought they were booing people. I thought they were booing Tommy Chong's.
Well, they were booing Tommy Chong for mentioning like it's funny. Like I'm at a tech fest this weekend, the last couple of days, right? I met Guy Kawasaki today, and in his talk, he says how amazing it is to have a leader of a country that will admit to making a mistake, and apologize for it. How refreshing, and yet half of Canada is ready to jump on the conservative bandwagon and vote Trudeau out of office and go back to the dark ages, which is what I don't get. Stephen Harper was as bad as Trump, but like he had people to protect him, so you didn't know he was conniving behind the scenes, right? Don't get me started on Canadian politics. Yeah. Like I said many times, the problem with democracy is everyone gets a vote.
Yeah. Well, interesting things are happening in our politics right now. Oh, we're recording.
Yeah. We'll talk about it after we stop recording. I'm just having a quick look at the stories. Even the ones that I put up, I can't remember what I put up. Okay, here, those two I know
you
about.
Posted a link to a tweet that just said, thanks.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, I put Tim's name on it because...
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Jaime.
If you look up in the thread, it makes more sense. But the only thing that had hashtag AskMTJC was the one that I pulled from the...
Oh, okay.
Oh, I see.
Another friend of mine who I've been pushing to get into podcasting because he's an interesting guy has started one as well with a friend of his from Chicago, I think. And it's another casual conversation, but he's a big he's got a lot of knowledge on music and things like that. So and very well read. So lots of interesting stuff coming his way. But they were only into it for a couple of weeks. It's called the Agency Podcast. I don't know why they called it that, but there you have it. I'll put a link in the show notes. Yeah, what else is going on? Oh, we were going to talk about politics, but we have to stop recording first, right? Yes? No?
Yep, sure.
All right, well, let's turn off the machines. Let me stop this.